Welcome to the podcast. Here's a sneak peek of what's coming up in today's episode. Did you used to be crap at sales?
Anything that you could possibly struggle with as an SDR, I did. Because I remember having a phone call, having like a 20-minute long conversation with someone, and the meeting not converting to my manager in a one-on-one and saying, "Can you tell me what I did wrong?" And he hit play and he listened for a little bit and then he hit pause and he said, "You know what? I don't have time for this." He just believed in me so little that he didn't even think that I was worth taking the time to coach. But that's how bad I was at sales. I couldn't even get coaching from my manager.
How did that make you feel?
I was pissed as fuck. And I thought, I just need to find a place where that is not the culture, because I can't get the coaching I need. If I could just master the basic skills, then I knew I could take like my work ethic and my creativity and be great.
You went to Gong. Did you know at the time what kind of rocket ship you were boarding when you took that job?
No, I had no idea. But the pitch of Gong at the time was like, replicate your top performers, turn your C players into A players. I was like, well, I'm an F player, so I asked in my interview to the CRO, I was like, one of my big concerns is that you have such a young manager. Are you sure that he's going to be able to enable me? Ryan Longfield, who's the CRO of Gong at the time, said, "Yeah, I am." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Because he's just that good." And he was so right. Tanner is the best manager I've ever had. But
also, you create a personal brand. I remember seeing you come online, this video, and I remember thinking, like, they've hired an actor here.
Well, I was an actor.
No, I know, but that's what I thought. I thought they've hired an actor in a sales role. But do you realise just how much it would take off?
What happened was...
Hello and welcome to another episode of I Used to Be Crap at Sales. My name's Mark Akers, co-founder and head of sales at My Sales Coach. And today I am joined by, this is a lot of this, a former foreign correspondent, a former speech and drama teacher, a former actor, founding coach of SDR Nation, possibly, and this might be your biggest hint, possibly Gong's biggest ever celebrity employee, an advisor at no less than 5 SaaS companies. At the time of recording, just over 80,000 LinkedIn followers. That's increased by 2,500 since yesterday. The co-founder of Dimmo, but most importantly, and a big congratulations, a soon-to-be mother. If you haven't guessed it by now, it's Sarah Brazier. Sarah, big welcome to the I Used to Be Crap at Sales podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Let's kick off with a yes/no question, Sarah. Did you used to be crap at sales?
Yeah, of course. No doubt.
So let's get into your background. A really interesting background. I've been aware of you for, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years. Obviously, you're a prominent voice on LinkedIn, but only when I really looked at your profile did I see a really interesting background that just I wasn't expecting. I believe a key to any elite salesperson is being able to storytell. And I saw that you were a news director for what I believe is a student radio station, and then a foreign correspondent for a couple of months in a beautiful city of Rome. Tell me a little bit about that, like headline level, but kind of what transferable skills you think you picked up in those roles there to help you get to where you are today.
Sure. So my degree is in broadcast journalism. So both the foreign correspondent and the news director, that was for both our college radio station and then for our TV station. And I think there are things that I use literally every day. And that is, one, writing succinctly in the active voice. That's like huge when you're trying to communicate and sell, especially when prospecting. And then 2, it's the takeaway. Everything, you should be able to tell the entire story in your headline is sort of the rule that I was given as a student in journalism. And so in sales, that's basically the same thing. You want to be able to help your buyer make decisions very quickly, and you want to give them the 5-cent takeaway, the 1,000-foot view, whatever it is, really quick, that snapshot. And then you can dive deeper into whatever else, when you're going into your metrics and your impact statements and doing your demo or whatever. But just really succinct communication, whether it's written or verbal. which that wasn't a very succinct answer. So
I didn't want to say that, but I was what he was telling a story. I was listening, but I see a lot of sales reps go wrong there. You know, you ask for a pitch or what do you do, and you get 3-4 minute answers, and you're not very clear. So I can certainly see that if you mastered that very early on, how that would have helped you. And then 8 years as an actor on stage live. What's the biggest thing that you started?
oh, I don't know. I think probably one of the shows I did was called Women in Jeopardy, and it ran for a really long time in Walnut Creek, which is right outside of San Francisco. And that was at like a regional theater. So that was probably the place that paid me the most to act. And we consistently had a full house. I also did speech and debate when I was in high school and in college. And so the final round of my national performance for speech and debate in high school, you perform in front of 5,000 people. Like the whole tournament shows up to watch you. So that's like the biggest audience that I've performed in front of.
How'd you find that?
I mean, I think I went into a completely different sort of zen state of almost out of body experience. I don't think I've ever had that much adrenaline in my body ever again. It was wild. It was like dream state, but it's real. There's a video of it somewhere on the internet. Yeah, it was great.
And obviously, like another key to sales, I believe, is being able to play that role. And whilst we all want to put our best foot forward, we also want to be authentic. But there is always a mask there, particularly on a discovery call, on a demo, where you are trying to best present yourself. And again, I imagine having that background as an actor for 8 years would have been helpful for you, unless you think that's wrong.
No, I think that's right. But I think the thing that people don't necessarily connect to acting right away, that is the most influential in how you run your deals, is that you are looking at everything. You're looking at the situation from all different kinds of perspectives, and you get really good at putting yourself in your buyer's shoes. So in a show, you are given a piece of paper with words on it, and you have to lift those words off the page, breathe life into them, and make a one-dimensional concept into a living, breathing, believable human being, that where the audience will suspend their disbelief and go on a journey with you. And to do that, you have to say, well, I have to take off my Sarah Brazier every day 2024 hat, and I have to go put on Cecily's hat and the importance of being earnest, where she's 16 years old and in love with someone she's never met, and wander down that path and try to justify why she's saying what she's saying, understand why she's saying what she's saying, know why she's doing these things, and the dynamics of everybody else in that scene. And so you start thinking about, what does this person really want? Why do they want it? Why would they do that thing? Why would they say that thing? What's the subtext going on? And all of that is really breaking down the psychological concepts that are happening in building a character. And you do the exact same thing when you are in sales. You go, what would compel my buyer to make a decision, to move faster? Why are they even looking at making this purchase? What are they potentially not telling me? What's the subtext to whatever they're doing or whatever they're saying on the call? And you're trying to figure out, 80% of the sales cycle happens when you, the seller, are not in the room. And so you're trying to figure out what's going on behind the scenes. And I think that is like the most applicable aspect to me from theater to sales.
So I think that's a fascinating answer. And that is the challenge lots of salespeople face. They're selling to a persona or a role that they've just never done. So how do you put that hat on and imagine what they're going through, what they're trying to solve, particularly an SDR, right? So if you take an SDR that joins a company, they could be speaking to marketing managers, people that run fintech firms. Like they don't know that role, and it can be really hard to put that on. And even when you start as an AE, if you're selling to CFOs, for example, CROs, not done that role. And that can be really hard. So I imagine that whilst you could get your head around what you had to do, there was still a big learning curve as to the people that you were selling to.
Sure. Well, I think, no. I mean, so in theater as an actor, the things that you want are the audience to love you. You want them to laugh at your jokes. You want a big applause at the end. Actors are selfish. We want attention. We're big hams. And that's okay. Like, as long as we know that, that's okay. That's something we can accept. And we want to do something that's meaningful, that moves the audience, and they'll remember. That's not what my character wants in the show. So I have to, put away what Sarah wants. So you can translate that to an SDR. I want to book a meeting. I want to hit quota. I want to make money. Those are the things that I want. That's not what my buyer wants. That's not what my prospect wants. So instead, I go, okay, what would that person want? Well, to understand what they want, I need to understand their world. So that's where something like when I sold Gong, it was very helpful because you could go and you could listen to a prospect talking about the things that they want, talking about why they're making a purchase. You could go listen to customer success calls. You could really try to get into their world. And when you're prepping for a role in theater, you either, if you're playing an everyday person, if you're playing a cop, you might go interview a cop and ask them about their day to day. If you are, if you get to be like an Angelina Jolie or, someone who's famous, you definitely have the privilege of being able to go shadow people in their jobs. But you're doing research and you're trying to understand what their world looks like. And you do the exact same thing in theater. I'm sitting down and I'm reading about what someone's life is like, and I'm just doing a lot of imagining. So as an SDR, that's kind of what I do. It's like, what does this person want? Why would they want that? What's going on in their lives? What's making them pull their hair out? What are their objectives? How are they going to get there? And the more you ask and then you ask people, you ask your prospect, well, what are you trying to do? Well, why are you trying to do that? And if you come at the role with a lot of curiosity and you're not focused so much on booking a meeting right away, then you can have a much better conversation, and it's probably going to convert, because then you can start connecting the dots between their pain points and what they're doing on a daily basis and the efficiencies that you can bring them with whatever you're selling.
I mean, it's a great answer. Like, particularly again, the storytelling and the analogy, it works so well. I think that again is where I see sales reps struggle, is disconnecting from the outcome. And I think that is the challenge in a role where it's target based, it's commission based, it's performance based. If you have a couple of bad months, you can be out of a job. But the secret is disconnecting from that outcome. And as you say, trying to focus on what the prospect wants. It's not about you, it's about them and their world and their problems. But I've never heard it described with that analogy that I think works so well. So you mentioned Gong there. That's the first sort of notable SaaS job on what is a very busy LinkedIn page. Most people don't want to be in sales. Like, they don't want to go and do a job, particularly when you really break down what an SDR role is. That doesn't sound appealing to many people. Was it a conscious choice of yours to take a sales role, an SDR role for a SaaS company, or how did you end up there?
Yeah. So I actually worked at a different company before I worked at Gong, and I just didn't put it on my resume because I was so bad at sales that there was no point in being like, yeah, I worked at this company for 9 months and never hit quota. But
Right.
that's the real story. That's the where I was crap at sales. So the lead up to getting to that job is I was in the Bay Area and I was acting, but I was also working as a barista, and I was also working as a speech and debate coach in the evenings at an after school program. And I was working as a temp worker at Optimizely at their front desk. And I was doing all of that because I needed health insurance and I needed to pay rent. And you don't make a ton of money acting because the jobs are so few and far between. And unless you're getting union jobs, then you could get paid $500 for 20 hours a week across 2 months, and that's what you're going to get. And it's definitely a labor of love. So that's the situation I was in. I was working 80 to 90 hours a week, 7 days a week, I'd wake up at 4:00 in the morning to get to the train, to be at the barista, to be at Phil's, the place where I was a barista, at 4:30, so we could get everything set up to open at 5. And then I'd make coffee until like 11 o'clock. I'd jog over to Optimizely's office. I'd use their shower. And then at 11:30, I'd be at the front desk. And I'd work the front desk until the end of day, so like 4:35. And then I'd pack up. I would go home, put on the clothes I was going to wear for rehearsal and eat a quick bite, and then jump in my car, drive out to the East Bay, and then rehearse until 11 o'clock at night. And that was my schedule. And then on weekends, I would rehearse, but I wouldn't have to barista or anything. So I thought, man, this really isn't sustainable. I'm kind of tired. I'm getting kind of fat because I don't have any time to exercise. I literally use my lunch break to go in the meditation exercise room at Optimizely. I was very lucky they had showers, and I'd throw a ball against the wall for 20 minutes and then shower real quick, and then I'd eat my lunch at my desk. But yeah, I was like, this. I think like the lack of sleep and the stress levels. I was like not very healthy, and I was totally exhausted, and I was barely. I don't even know if I was breaking even to make rent. It was really hard. And every day, people would walk past my desk who were working these really nice SaaS jobs, making way more money than I was, and working far fewer hours. So I would, I would just say, "Hey, what do you do?" to people. And they say, "Oh, I'm the chief marketing officer." And say, "I'd really love to learn more about marketing. Can I grab your ear for a minute sometime?" And they'd say, "Sure." And then we'd go get coffee during a lunch break, or I get someone to cover me. And I talked to a bunch of different people. And one of those individuals was Jim Jones, who ran enablement at Optimizely. And he said, "I coach salespeople, essentially." And I said, "That's great. I think I'd be a great salesperson. Everyone tells me so." And he said, "Great, read this book." And he gave me To Sell is Human. And he said, "When you're done reading that book, come talk to me and let me know if you want to do sales." And so I read the book, and I said I finished it. We got coffee. And then he just started introducing me to SDRs that he had mentored over, the course of his career. And he knew a ton of people. He knows a ton of people. He's really good at his job. And I shadowed some SDRs at Optimizely in my free time. I took a bunch of notes, and I started interviewing. And so I got referred into a company through that networking that Jim really helped me do. He helped me edit my resume. He helped me make my LinkedIn look good. And that's how I got my first sales job. But it was really I was desperate. I was hungry. I wanted to make enough money to put some in savings. And I knew that if I could just get my foot in the door, then I could be good at sales, because all of the skills that I had been building up until that point, I think translate really well. Storytelling, being outgoing, being gritty when you've got a lot of doors slamming in your face, which I think there's way more rejection in theater than there is in being an SDR. So yeah, that's how I ended up in sales. It was a conscious choice, but it was a conscious choice made out of desperation.
And I mean, yeah, again, I was just listening to everything you said there. So much that we could break down, but it feels like you identified what you wanted and you made it happen, which again is the key to sales, right? You hunt what you want, you make it happen. And it feels like Jim Jones was important there. So he gave you that book. How long did it take you to read it with such a busy schedule?
It took like a week. I definitely remember I flipped through some sections because I was like, this is a little redundant. Fortunately, it's a short book, and thematically, it's basically like everything that I already knew, like at my core, in tuned, which is selling is not about convincing someone that you're right, and selling is not about reaching your goals or your targets. Selling is about building a human connection and solving a problem. And if you can do that, then you're going to make way more sales, even though you have to put what you want, which is to hit quota and make a bunch of money, on hold. And you have to decide that what the customer wants is more important than your goals. But if you do that, you can build trust. And I was reading an article about just building trust and building relationship is so important, because people remember and align with people that they like. So if you have two teachers teaching a group of students, and one teacher is a big butthead and the other teacher all the kids love, the kids are going to remember and like be able to regurgitate the information they learned from the teacher they loved versus the teacher that they didn't like at all. So yeah, so if you're a jerk salesperson who's being a jerk to your prospect, you're going to lose a lot of deals. because you've got commission breath, you're hunting what you want, versus if you are really trying to serve your customer, then you're going to win more opportunities.
Yeah, and they pick up on that. They know with commission breath questions versus genuine curiosity to try and help them get to the right solution. So Jim Jones gives you that book, you read it, sits down, has a coffee. You said he then sort of coached you for interviews, LinkedIn profile, etc. How impactful was that coaching from someone that had done it before? They had success in that role and helped you. How impactful was that for you and your progression?
Super. I mean, he's the first person to teach me how to close an interview. Hey, Mark, is there any reason or any hesitation that you have about moving me forward in this process? I wouldn't have thought to ask that. And there are people who will not hire you unless you ask that question, because that makes you a salesperson. For an entry-level role, no, you don't. I don't think that should be your requirement, but that does mean that that person has done a little bit of homework. So learning to ask that question, getting coaching on just like what makes a good follow-up email, editing my resume to tell the story of I'm a storyteller, I'm competitive, I'm results driven. I am all of those things, but how do you get that onto a one sheet of paper and make it look good when your jobs have been nonprofit to teaching to theater? Like, how do you, sew that all together with a little bit of baristaing in between? So all of that I think was really important. But the most important thing was that he was basically what a champion is in a deal. He opened doors for me. And he went to people and said, you should talk to Sarah. She's got potential. And if you have a good champion in a deal, they're going to do the exact same thing. They're going to say, you've got to talk to the salesperson. You've got to look at this tool. I think it could really help us. It's got a lot of potential. You just have to hear them out. And he was definitely that for me.
And was there a reason he couldn't get you a job in that company?
I think I could have gotten a job at Optimizely. I don't think that they were hiring as aggressively as some other organizations. So there were open opportunities where people were willing to put me. But yeah, I think I probably could have gotten a job there. Gotcha. If I had just waited a little bit longer.
It sounded like you're too hungry for that first role, and obviously
or just literally hungry.
Well, yeah. So talk to me about that role then. That role is not on your resume. It's not on your LinkedIn. No need to name where that company was, but you said you were crap there. Tell me about that 9-month period and what your struggles were.
Anything that you could possibly struggle with as an SDR, I did. So everything from, I explained it, I remember going into meetings and telling people this. It's like, I know that there's a way to do this. I know there's a formula to these conversations. I know there's got to be like a call. There's got to be some kind of tree, a logical tree that I can follow when I'm on a cold call. There's got to be some kind of logical way to write these emails that are compelling. I don't know. Can someone please tell me? And no one really could. So going somewhere where people actually knew like what worked and what didn't was very, very helpful. But the company, I think they were scaling super fast, and the SDR team had been just a handful of reps, maybe 1 or 2 months before, and they must have had 50 plus reps by the time I left. So in 9 months, going from 5, they 10x the size. And so, yeah, I didn't know. I was making cold calls, but I didn't know how to handle them. Aside from, an elevator pitch and, asking for permission to pitch, that was about as far as I had. And I didn't really know how to ask discovery questions in a cold call or objection handle in a cold call to get to the next thing. More importantly, I was very unclear about who my ICP was. And the business didn't really know what their ICP was. So you could, the people that they told me to prospect we're selling, the company should have been selling to finance, but we were prospecting into anybody who could be a front desk person, booking meetings and organizing someone's calendar, like an executive assistant, to the CFO. That's the breadth that they were giving us as potential people to call on. And so that didn't feel particularly logical to me, but I didn't know how to articulate that because I didn't have the business acumen to say, I don't think we have the right ICP. I didn't even know what the word ICP meant. or the acronym. So, like, not being able to define who to call on and not being able to define why someone would purchase the product, because the benefit and the marketing that we did really talked about end user experience, but the end user benefit was not the same as why a CFO would make a purchase. And so I couldn't talk about why CFOs would buy. I could only talk about what the employees of that company would experience as a benefit. And it was very hard for me to connect the two because I didn't have the business acumen and I didn't have the knowledge of the ICP. And I had I had a blank canvas. So yeah, I mean, I like that was really confusing to me. Not knowing like basic things around how do I utilize Zoom info so I can actually get a lead list and like get it well. So I would spend like time just I would like download these CSV files from Zoom info and then be like manually deleting stuff and then upload it to Salesforce, like huge, massive waste of time because I didn't understand how to use the technology yet, which I eventually figured out. Writing really marketing sounding emails instead of something that was really prospect related. So really broad, send out to 100 people the same email instead of writing a why you, why now style email or, whatever format you think of, but writing a personalized email about why you should care in this exact moment. Yeah, I mean, those are like all the things that SDRs do, and I didn't know how to do any of them.
And it sort of links to, I suppose, what we were saying earlier, though. You were tasked with trying to get on the same page as a CFO in that example, and you've never done that role before, and that can be the challenge, can't it? So help me understand, Sarah, when you're saying you didn't know how to do any of those things, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being crap, how crap were you in that role?
I mean, I think my manager would say I was like 500. But definitely at least a 10. Yeah, I remember like and part of the problem was that the business had scaled too quickly, because I remember having a phone call, having like a 20-minute long conversation with someone, and the meeting not converting, that call not converting. I was like, how could I talk to someone for 20 minutes? They could tell me all these problems, they could tell me all their challenges, and then they don't take a meeting with the account executive. What did I do wrong? So I remember taking that call to my manager in a one-on-one and saying, hey, can you tell me what I did wrong? And he said, well, what part of the call do you want to listen to? And I said, I don't know, because I don't know where I messed up. So can we just listen to all of it? And he hit play and he listened for a little bit. And then he hit pause and he said, you know what? I don't have time for this. Why don't you go find someone else? And then we ended our one-on-one early. And it was like I don't know if it was he really didn't have time, or he had, at that point, he just believed in me so little that he didn't even think that I was worth taking the time to coach. But that's how bad I was at sales. I couldn't even get coaching from my manager to figure out what went wrong in a call.
How did that make you feel? Like when he paused it and said, go and find someone else, don't have time. How did that make you feel?
I was pissed as fuck. I saw red. I called my mom. I was like, this is bullshit.
What did your mom say?
My dad worked in sales my whole life, and she said, there are salespeople, there are sales managers who want to help you succeed, but there are a lot of people who are in the profession that are out there for themselves, and they only want to do things that make them look good. And this person clearly doesn't think that you can make him look good. So he's not going to help you. And I think that's true. And it's not just in sales. There's lots of different things. Having worked in theater, there's very exploitative people in theater who they will take a young ingenue who wants to be on stage, and they'll make you work crazy hours and do crazy things. I mean, you can do some research on it, but it's the same deal. There's just like there are people like that. There are people who will take advantage of you or not care about you or throw you to the side when you're not serving their purpose anymore. And I thought, I just need to find a place where that is not the culture, because I can't get the coaching I need. I just need like some basic guidelines. I need a couple curbs. I need someone to tell me, do this, not that. Once I could, if I could just master the basic skills, then I knew I could take like my work ethic and my creativity and be great. And I told that to him. I said, I'm a national champion in speech and debate. I have been in dozens of shows. I I was one of the top ranked speakers in the entire country. I can talk in front of people. I can tell stories, and I have a history of success, and I don't lose. And I'm losing right now. And I need you to help me figure out why I'm losing. And if you can't do that, then I don't really know what the point is. I don't, like, what is it that you do here? Which I probably shouldn't have said, especially in that way. But I was really mad by that point in time. And this is probably like 6 or 7 months into the role. And then I was like, I'm just going to find somewhere else to work. Because whatever it is that these people are asking me to do, which was basically like, you need to be making 200 calls a day. Great, I can make 200 calls a day, but I still don't know who I'm supposed to be calling on. And I still don't know what I'm supposed to say. And no one seems to be able to have an answer. And then they gave me like Arkansas as my territory, Arkansas and Maine. And I was selling something that you really should be selling to like tech companies. I was like, I don't know a single tech company HQ'd in Arkansas. I'm pretty sure the largest industry in Maine is fishing. I don't think they're going to buy, guys. So, yeah, I mean, obviously I still get worked up about it because it was just so illogical. And if you pointed out the fact that it doesn't make sense that there's one SDR working all of California and there's a different SDR working all of New York, and you have 48 other SDRs and half of them are working Oklahoma and Wisconsin, but they all have the same quota, that the SDRs who are working, the one SDR working California and the one SDR working New York are going to wildly blow their number out compared to the ones in Wisconsin and Arkansas. That like, you just look at the TAM, except I didn't have the word TAM, but I was like, just look at Zoom Info. Just look at the companies on Zoom Info. But no one wanted to hear me be critical. No one wanted to solve that problem. I was difficult.
Do you think you were difficult?
No, I think I wasn't difficult. I think I was pointing out a problem.
Yeah. I was going to say,
I was pointing out a really obvious problem, but they didn't have the answers, or they didn't have the agency, so they weren't gonna fix it, or they couldn't. No one could explain to me why territories were assigned the way they were. No one really knew. But also, like, our marketing team was sending out, again, I think they should have been selling to CFOs. The marketing team ran a campaign where they sent out it was a direct mail campaign. They sent out flyers and they said, if you take a demo with us, you'll get a $100 Amazon gift card, with no even little fine print that said, if you're a qualified buyer. And so I got put on the inbound line, and I was just talking to women who worked the front desk at dentist's office. I had a lot of dentist's office for some reason calling in, wanting their $100 Amazon gift card. And I'd run the qualification criteria, and they didn't do any of the things. They didn't have the spend that they needed to in order to purchase the product. So I was like, I'm sorry, you can't watch a demo because you'll never use this. And then they get so mad because they didn't get their $100 Amazon gift card. Then you go back to marketing and be like, hey, we don't have any clause about disqualifying them. So we gave away tons of $100 Amazon gift cards to front desk ladies at dentist's office. But I was like, that doesn't really make sense. Why we do that in the first place? I feel like we could do that differently. And I was being difficult. But I clearly didn't understand marketing.
Exactly. I know you're being humble there, but it doesn't sound like you're being difficult at all. You are just trying to find solutions. Obviously, we don't need to dwell on him much more. And like you say, I can see you're still emotional when you think about it. But what's that manager doing right now? Do you know?
No, I don't. I guess I could look them up on LinkedIn and see. But I think the company kind of figured itself out, and they decided, we will only talk to people in finance and we'll only sell to CFOs. And I was like, I wonder who came up with that idea.
Well,
It wasn't just me. I'm sure there's a lot of people who felt the same way. But
I'm sure.
yeah.
I'm sure your manager knows where you are now. Anyway, so you chose to leave. You went to Gong. Did you know at the time what kind of rocket ship you were boarding when you took that job?
No, I had no idea. But the pitch of Gong at the time was like replicate your top performers, turn your C players into A players. I was like, well, I'm an F player, so either my thought was either I really am stupid and everything I'm thinking is incorrect and I don't know anything about sales. I don't really believe that, but maybe that's a harsh reality I've yet to accept. Or maybe I could go somewhere that seems to know and like is literally selling a software to help you turn your struggling performers into successful ones. And if they're selling that software and they can't transform me, then I guess I should go back to school and get a master's degree in something or go live with my parents and try to figure out my next step. But that was sort of like the point where I had come to. Um, so no, I didn't know I was joining a rocket ship. I just thought I was going to get to a place where someone could say something that made sense to me and I could do it on a phone or send it in an email and people would go, "Yeah, I'll take a meeting with you." And that is exactly what happened.
Would you say then like that was your last chance saloon? Like it either works out at Gong or I'm going to leave the profession.
Yeah. Yeah. I said I'm gonna go to Gong and I'm gonna give it my best shot for 12 months. And I'm not gonna be distracted. So I'm not gonna do any shows. I'm not gonna be in any plays. I'm not gonna have any after hours, anything. I'm just gonna try to master the craft. And so I didn't do any shows. I did one thing where I produced a show, but it was only on weekends and it wasn't a big lift. And that was after I had already started like consistently hitting my quota. And yeah, I got there, and my manager was this guy who's 25. His name's Tanner Robinson. He's no longer 25. But I asked in my interview to the CRO, I was like, one of my big concerns is that you have such a young manager, and are you sure that he's going to be able to enable me? And Ryan Longfield, who's the CRO of Gong at the time, said, "Yeah, I am." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Because he's just that good." And he was so right. Um, Tanner is the best manager I've ever had. And he was able to explain to me exactly why people buy. And that's what we did in our first week of onboarding. It was just like, what is a CRO? What does he care about? What does she care about? Why would they care about those things? What are their goals? Why do they pull their hair out? What keeps them up at night? What's painful to them? How is that different than a VP of sales? What is a VP of sales experiencing? How does that trickle down to the director? How does enablement influence this? How does whatever? And it's just literally just sitting around and talking about what these people want, why they would want it, really understanding your buyer persona, and then going, okay, so then where does Gong, a solution, fit into that? And how do you articulate it? And we would write our outbound emails. We wouldn't even mention Gong in the email. We would just talk about problems. And then we'd say, does this sound interesting to you? Is this happening in your world? And people would be like, yeah, totally. Where our cold call was just like our cold call script was just literally describing the status quo of being in the dark as a CRO and not knowing what's going on in your business. And, struggling to be able to identify what was going wrong. And I was like, man, that sounds like the company I just worked at.
Did you prospect them?
This makes so much sense.
Did you prospect them?
I didn't prospect them. They were a customer already, but I didn't have an account as an SDR. They only gave it to the account executives, and then Gong's competitor, they hired a new CMO, and the CMO sat on the board of one of their competitors, and so they switched.
Gotcha. How would you describe, like you said at the start, you should be able to tell a story in a headline. Tell us, from those that haven't lived it, we've just seen it from the outside, what was that journey like at Gong from day one to the day you left? Like, it must have been crazy.
It was super crazy, but really it was fun. And your self-esteem, if you spend 9 months not hitting quota, is just tanking. It's just dropping into ground and being run over by a bulldozer or something. I don't know. So when I got on the phones at Gong, and I was full outbound, they didn't give me anything inbound. It was like week 2, maybe week 2 or beginning of week 3. Just like being like getting on the phones and trying to pitch and getting on the phones and trying to objection handle. The thing that Tanner did so well is that even if I didn't book a meeting, he had alerts set up so that he could go listen to the call right away, and then he'd give me feedback, but he'd always have something encouraging to say, like, great delivery of the pitch, good pivot here, so close, maybe you should try saying this next time. And then every week he would go through and we would listen to calls where people didn't book the meeting, but they got really close, and we would talk about what that person did really well, and he would call out what they liked, and then we would brainstorm as a collective SDR team how could we have handled this call differently. And so that was like everybody was working as a team to help each other get better. People would hand each other leads, say, hey, I saw that this account is in your book, and this lead just posted this thing on LinkedIn. I think you should call them about that. It's great, like capitalize on that. So I mean, it was just like it was a completely different environment. And so I would get on calls and people would be interested in talking, and my manager would be celebrating that. And then I would be prospecting on LinkedIn, and I would screenshot conversations and text them on the weekend to my manager, and he'd be like, really good, try this line. So I'd be like working on the weekend on my phone, like, at the beach, and he'd be responding to me. It's just a really supportive environment. And so that, like, you can fall in love with a company that way. You really feel like you're in a culture that's going to help you thrive, and it did. And you're finding wins, and you're coming up with ideas about, hey, I noticed this thing going on. I would notice things happening on the floor, and I would say, hey, Tanner, I noticed X, Y, and Z's happening. And he'd be like, great, how are you going to fix that? Do you want to run a session on it? It wouldn't be like, no, that's dumb, go sit in your spot, go be in your place. It'd be like, good point, and how can we build a better solution moving forward? And so I got to run enablement trainings, and I had an improv session after working hours once a week if people wanted to come do improv. And I got to work with marketing, and I ran Life After SDR, which is I just interviewed people about what do you do once you've been an SDR? And it was like the highest performing video that Gong had at the time, like video series Gong had at the time on LinkedIn and YouTube. So like people were just like, yes, and yes, and so when you're like a high energy person with lots of creativity, I mean, that's like the environment you want to be in. No one's shutting you down. People are just like, let's keep building. Let's run as fast as we can. If you've got the energy to do it, let's get it done. And it was awesome. Like, I loved it. The worst thing that happened was that COVID hit us, and I didn't get to be in the office and have all of that kind of energy around. But still, we were able to, have, these got boring after a while, but we got to have like happy hours after work on Zoom. And COVID started out kind of fun, but obviously it was a drag once we realized, oh, this isn't like a 1 month in quarantine. This is like 2 years. And California, like San Francisco Bay Area, had some of the tightest laws, I think, around it. So yeah, I mean, selling in COVID, we did really well. It was like, well, now you really don't have visibility into what's happening. And that's where I learned how to sell as an account executive and got promoted. And that was really exciting because, I mean, I was being challenged in so many different ways and learning on the fly. And I would wake up sometimes at like 5 a.m. to take calls with clients who were in Europe. And then I'd be on the phone with people in Australia that night, like 8 p.m. And so I think I learned a ton because I was doing so much, and we didn't have our European office yet. So I was just going. It was great. It was for sure being on a rocket ship. Yeah, good time had by all. I liked working at Gong. I learned and I was celebrated. And I think those are two things that companies should always do.
And it sounds like the key to at least the first 6, 9, maybe 12 months was the manager, was the investment in you and your development, was the coaching, the constant feedback. And that can do nothing but just accelerate you towards your goals, your potential. And it's great to hear you got so much of that. Do you think without that, let's just say you had the same manager, take the manager from the previous job, drop him into Gong, do you think you'd have been successful there?
I might have been like mildly successful because Gong as a company knew who they were selling to a lot more, and I could go and listen to calls. But no, I don't think so. I 100% believe that it takes a village, and that you can have the most talented person in the world, but if you put them in a disparaging environment and you don't teach them and you don't invest in them, then you're not going to get the same output. And I get I get a little miffed sometimes when I talk to sales leaders, and I tell them that story, maybe condensed, and they go, "Oh, well, Sarah, you're just different. You're just really hardworking. You're just gritty. Not a lot of people are like you." And I'm like, "That's not true. Maybe that's not true. There's lots of people who want it, and they need the guardrails, they need the training wheels, they need some help, they need some guidance. And if you can put people in an environment where they're not being told, they're not being forced, you have to write this email this exact way, but they're being told these are ways that you can write an email, and that was a really good first attempt. How can we tweak this and make it better?" And you're treating your subordinates as equals, and you're creating together instead of bossing, you're going to have a way better experience, and you're going to have people perform much better. So yeah, I think Tanner was a big difference. He's, like I said, he's great. And Gong did a really good job of hiring people like Tanner who wanted to make their sales reps fantastic. So when I interviewed to be an AE, there's a guy named Eric Belici, and he spent every week he met with me to practice my discovery call. I asked him for a rubric for what do I have to say in this interview? Tell me exactly what I have to get right in this mock discovery call to get promoted, because I didn't get promoted the first time I interviewed. And so we went through, and I was like, we're just going to practice the opening bit until you think it's good enough for me to get hired. Now we're going to do the pain funnel, but we're just going to practice that, and then we'll combine them. Like, and having that kind of, which I learned through speech and debate and acting, like just repetition until it's good and it's believable, and like you can do it in your sleep. I was like, we're going to do that, and you're going to help me, because I'm going to make you a bunch of money, but I just need you to get me there. And if you and the managers were like, yeah, I'll get you there. I'm ready to spend a lot of hours with you sucking so that you can be good. One day.
I love it. It sounds like what they were really hiring for was managers that just would coach. They knew the impact of coaching. They carved time out their day for one-to-one coaching, group coaching, really invest in their workforce. But also you create a personal brand, and I can't remember the video at all, but I do remember the first time I saw a video of you. It's kind of like you were walking through the Gong office. I can't recall it, but I'm sure you can't either. But I remember thinking like, who's this? What's going on here? Because like again, I appreciate you might not realize this, but I used to work for a company that would compete against Gong in certain deals, etc. I remember seeing you come online, this video, and I remember thinking like, they've hired an actor here. And like, what?
Well, I was an actor.
No, I know, but that's what I thought. I thought they've hired an actor in a sales role. But talk to me about like building that personal brand. How did you? I suppose what I'm trying to. Did you realize just how much it would take off? Like, if I was to say to you on that first post, you're going to amass 80,000 LinkedIn followers, and obviously it's only going to go in one direction. Did you think that was what would happen? Like, what was the aim?
No, and there was no aim. It was to have fun. Like every job that I do, I want to be having fun. If sales is going to be miserable sometimes, but overall it's fun. Like you get these adrenaline blasts, you get to compete, you get to think creatively, you get to tell stories. If you're only thinking of your job in sales as KPIs, then it's going to suck and it's not going to be fun. So you have to think about all of the other stuff you get to do that makes it fun. But what happened was I had been on a cold call with a VP of sales, and it was the beginning of Q4, and he said something like, "Don't you realize it's Q4? You shouldn't be calling people. call me in Q1. And I was like, what? Aren't you trying to close deals in Q4? And it was even the beginning of Q4. It wasn't even the end. There's plenty of time for us to have a conversation and help him close more deals in Q4 if he wanted to. And I just thought, oh, what irony calling someone in sales in Q4 and them telling you not to call people in Q4. So I wrote a post about it, and that's like the first thing that went viral. And if you scroll back, 5 or 6 years and you look at all of my posts before that, I maybe made like 3 posts and they have like maybe 1 like from, someone at Gong or someone I worked with. But that took off and it had like 2 million impressions and 10,000 engagements. And I thought it was going to be the best post that I've ever done ever. And it was until the one that I did most recently last week when we launched Dimmo. But yeah, so I did that, and everyone was really happy for me, and I thought, well, I'll just keep posting. And back then, the algorithm with LinkedIn, if you had that one viral post, they would really push your other ones. So I just kept getting more and more viral, and I would post on a given day and have 500, likes on a post. So all it is to say, it really helped me prospect as an SDR because I was getting a ton of sales leaders commenting, and I just talked about being an SDR, and it just became part of my strategy. At 11 o'clock, make a LinkedIn post, go eat lunch, come back, prospect off the post, and I'd still do all my cold calls in the morning, and I'd still send my emails in the afternoon. But I had this extra source of finding leads, finding little golden threads in the haystack. So that happened, and then when it came to the video stuff, I was getting coffee in the morning, and I ran into the CEO of Gong, and he said, "What'd you do this weekend, Sarah?" And I said, "Oh, I was actually hosting a show," because that was the show I was producing a show at the time, and it was really fun. I'd go on and introduce the different acts and just be like absolutely ridiculous. And he said, "You're hosting a show? Well, why aren't you hosting a show for Gong?" And I said, I don't know why you guys haven't put me on the camera yet." And he said, "Well, you need to go talk to marketing and you need to make a show." And I said, "Okay." And then I ran into him like an hour later, and he's like, "Have you talked to marketing yet?" And I said, "No," because I had to go make my cold calls. And he was like, "Come with me." And he marched me across the office to Udi, who was the chief marketing officer at the time. And he said, "Udi, Sarah's going to make a show for Gong." And Udi said, "Okay, what's the show going to be about?" And I said, "I don't know." He said, "Well, go figure that out, write a draft and work with Devin Reed on it." And I said, "Okay." I thought, well, what's something that I could talk about that people would find interesting, would be valuable to Gong's audience, and wouldn't feel like I was, reaching above my station. I just really didn't want to be someone who was trying to talk big like I knew the game when I didn't. So I thought, well, I'm at the point where I'm getting closer to being qualified to be promoted to an account executive. Is that what I want to do? What happens after you've been an SDR? What is your life? So I came up with the idea of life after SDR. Really simple. What do people do once they've been an SDR? And what are the other options aside from AE? Because I think that a lot of people are in sale or, join as an SDR, especially straight out of college. They go, "This isn't for me. I don't like the competition. I don't like the high pressure. I want something else. Get me out." And they don't know where else to go. So I thought if I could just put together a series of interviews with people who have done this job, but now they work in marketing, now they work in customer success, now they work in HR, and figure out how they navigated that path, that would be so valuable. And it was a question that I was asking myself too. Do I want to be an account executive or do I want to do something else? So I told Devin, and he was like, "Great, go find some people to interview." And I said, "Great." And then I just shot a series, and we'd have a video crew come in to film some other stuff. And so they'd just give me like a 15-minute slot, and I'd interview people about how'd you get into recruiting? How'd you negotiate that? How'd you become an AE? How'd you ace your interview to get that job? And yeah, it was really fun. But I didn't think it was going to be like wildly successful and that I would have, tens of thousands of followers on LinkedIn. I thought, I want to find out what I should do next, and might as well put it on camera because that's fun. and then I could practice writing and I could be in front of people, and it'd be something to look forward to in the week.
So, Sarah, here's the thing: lots of people will be listening to that, and they'll be posting content on LinkedIn, and they just won't get an ounce of the traction that you're getting. What advice would you give to a young SDR, a new AE that's trying to post on LinkedIn, and they are getting what you used to get, those 3 likes, the odd comment, a colleague, and they want more? What advice would you give them?
Yeah. So first of all, the sad reality is that LinkedIn's algorithm works differently. And so even the majority of my posts don't perform as well as they did when I was an SDR in 2019, 2020. So you're just not going to get that same traction is number one. Number two is you should ask yourself, am I doing this consistently enough? And for me, if you don't post every day or at least every weekday, you're going to lose any of the traction that you were building the day before. Like, and it seems to me, and I could be off base, but it seems to me like LinkedIn's algorithm is encouraging that kind of volume play. Whereas for a while, I could go a couple days between posting and still get a ton of likes. Now it's like I really have to be aggressively posting continuously. So those are two things just to keep in mind. Like, it's hard. It's hard to get traction, and it's very unclear what it is that the algorithm promotes or does not promote. The third thing is that you should look at the content that you're actually producing, and you should ask yourself two questions. Why am I writing this, and why would someone want to read this? And if the answer is I'm writing this because I want people to follow me on LinkedIn, then you might want to reevaluate the kind of content you're producing. And if the answer is I'm not sure why someone would read this, then you might want to reevaluate the content that you're producing, because you should have some kind of thematic motivation between your posts to actually create a brand. So you should say, what is it that I write? Why do I write it? And then you should also ask yourself, what is it that I want my audience to take away on a regular basis? For me, I want my audience to either laugh and go, yep, that's my life. That's my life in sales. That happens to me. Or feel some kind of empathetic way. Yeah, that does suck. I have experienced that. I was crap at sales too, or I am crap at sales, but there's a path forward. So, like, a way for us to commiserate together. Or I want to provide some kind of tactical action that they can take, saying, hey, I tried this. It worked for me in this way. You can try too if you want. I never want to tell people that I'm like the rightest or they have to do it my way, because I think there's more than one way to skin a cat. There's more than one way to start a cold call. There's than one way to write an email. But if you're looking for some structure, which I lacked so much in the first 9 months of me selling, if you're looking for someone to give you a formula, this is a formula you could apply and it might help. And then the last thing is just like, I write posts every so often, especially when I was an SDR, that were my punch up posts. And I think you're at the bottom of the totem pole as an SDR, and everybody's the meanest to you, and everybody blames you for everything that a lot of times isn't your fault. Sometimes it is your fault, but a lot of times it's not. Like, did I suck at sales in my first job because I was a bad SDR? Probably. I started getting a bad attitude, and I probably could have been nicer on the phone, and I probably could have worked harder on my emails. But also, there were like systematic issues with how that organization was running their SDR team, that if they had improved, it could have gone differently. And every once in a while, if you call out that stuff in a tasteful way, people are like, yeah. And so I call those punch up posts. But that's like calling out the sales leader who was mad at me for calling him in Q4. It's like, no way. You're dumb. You're dumb right now. You're just in a bad mood and you're being dumb. I'm going to call you again in 3 weeks. You're going to forget about yelling at me and you're going to take the meeting. I'm going to try again. I'm going to try differently. But that response was dumb. And everyone can collectively be like, yeah, that was dumb. Gosh.
So let's talk about your game today. What do you feel like is your biggest weakness? Right, we could all continue to improve. What's your biggest weakness in your game today?
Oh man, there's tons of things. Like, I still get happy years as a rep. I always get anxious about negotiating deals, uh, like being like, nope, that's the price. That's so hard, even though it's the price and it's not my money. There's tons of psychological reasons why talking about money is scary, and I totally still feel those. And then handling contentious conversations is always, I mean, they're like, I'm telling you a million things, but I hate disappointing people. I'm the middle of 7 kids. Um, so in some ways that makes me kind of like go along to get along, unless things are really stupid, and then I get mad. But like, um, if I'm trying to sell something, or if I want that person to like me, um, delivering disappointing news, telling them that we can't do the thing that they want to do, telling them that I can't get that like discount approved, all of that I hate. Um, and those conversations get me the most anxious. So I will sit down with my manager and I'll be like, can we just practice that? Can I just hear how you'd say that? Um, and those are the times when I have like the least confidence in my communication skills and the least confidence in being able to navigate the call, because my fear is that I'll freeze and I won't be able to keep talking or find a path forward. I'll just freeze and I'll be like, yeah, you're right. I do suck. I do suck and we should give you the discount, but I can't.
So what I love though, right, is you're still working on these things. Like you are seeking that coaching, you're seeking that development. So I am conscious that I literally could extend this conversation by another hour. But let's sort of, I suppose, because I'm conscious you've got a call coming up as well. Always selling. Tell us about Dimmo. That sounds really exciting. So you've gone off and created your own business with some co-founders, Dimmo. Tell us about the problems that Dimmo solve, and tell us all about it.
Yeah. So I don't think it's a secret right now that top of funnel is really hard, and that the motion of getting a bunch of college graduates into a room to dial in a boiler room isn't working. And the stats are all different depending on what source you're looking at. But what used to take maybe 4 touches to book a meeting is now upwards from anywhere from 15 to 30. At the same time, buyer behavior has changed a lot. 80% of the sales cycle happens when the sales rep's not in the room. Buyers are coming to customers a lot more informed. And buyers don't necessarily want to talk to sales until they're actually ready to buy. And so those exploratory conversations are happening far less frequently because 45% of decision makers are millennials and they want to be independent and do things on their own and do research by themselves before they have to have a conversation. So, all it is to say, when you're doing a sales cycle, a lot of times people will come in and they'll say, I just want to see a demo. And by the point they get to you, the account executive, they're already pretty frustrated because they wanted to see a demo. So they went to your website, but they couldn't find one. And then they had to fill out a bunch of forms. And then 2 days later, an SDR called them and asked them a bunch of questions. And then they finally got on the phone with the account executive, and the account executive doesn't want to show them a demo yet. They want to ask the same questions the SDR just asked. All so you can watch a demo and decide, yeah, I think that might solve my problem, or that's not really for me. So Troy Munson and Lucas Werksberg and I built Dimmo, and it is a marketplace where you as a buyer can come in and watch demos of SaaS. And you can go, yeah, that looks interesting. And then if you want to talk to sales, you can click a button and you can literally ask them a question and you'll get an email back with an answer. Or if you want to actually see an in-depth demo around a particular problem that you're interested in solving for your business, you can request that. Or you can go down the demo chain. And so I think that's one piece of what we're doing. The other piece is I think it kind of democratizes your actual research, because the companies that you see at the top of your Google search are paid ads. It's SEO, it's whoever has the biggest budget to spend on advertisements. And so you're missing a lot of small companies that are building something really cool or building and solving the problem differently that you might not get. So when you go to Dimmo's website, you can type in your use case or your challenge, and then you'll be surfaced up all the different products that could solve your challenges. So I think it's beneficial both for companies and for buyers. buyers can skip a bunch of the process. And then companies who are struggling to get top of funnel all of a sudden can be talking to actually engaged buyers who have already seen the demo. They know they are interested in moving forward in the buying decision. And so I think it'll eventually increase win rates as well, because you'll be talking to qualified, interested buyers instead of some guy who just wants to see a demo.
Amazing. That sounds really exciting. I've certainly registered my sales coach to be on the website, so I look forward to hearing back. Sarah, thanks so much. I've really enjoyed having a podcast. I'd love to have you back on the podcast in the future, because there's just so much more we could talk about. But yeah, thanks very much. Really enjoyed it.